They're smashing windows at McDonald's. They're dumping over garbage cans. And they are very angry again and hostile. We're seeing more clashes with other protesters telling them to stop because they're giving everyone a bad name. None of the protesters, the legitimate protesters down here, want any of this kind of action, and they are very angry.
So right now, knocking at the newspaper.
Megan, any sign yet of police trying to track them down?
There are no police anywhere. They're going like... They're breaking the bank window here at U.S. Bank. We got to get out of here. We're going to run up the street because if they see us, they attack us. And so we're keeping a safe distance away from them.
Several police officers have told us because they were assigned to control the protest crowds, they weren't allowed to break ranks and to stop the black bloc. So the group just continued destroying property for nearly an hour.
What's wrong with this picture? If the police are supposedly there to protect the public and property, then why? Why did state police, Seattle police, as well as the feds, stand back and allow the anarchists en masse to run around and throw bottles at police, cones, rocks, you name it, and assault private property as well as members of the general public? Because they needed someone to demonize the rest of the good demonstrators. Now, my friends, this is an old tactic throughout history. If you have opposition, you simply demonize them by creating your own crisis, your own massacre or terrorist bombing or incident, and then blaming it on your political opponents. When you have 50, 60,000 peaceful demonstrators out exposing the corruption, how do you neutralize them? Well, you simply send in your boys to create a crisis, to offer a solution. Now, we're not saying that local police knew what was going on. Certainly not. They just were following their orders, which is frightening in and of itself, to let a bunch of anarchists, 30 or 40 of them tops, run around and burn and break things because they were ordered to do so. We're going to play you some little clips from newscasts and some amateur video. Then we'll move into even more evidence that this was a government action. You see, the anarchists were actually given their own operations base, even during the curfew and civil emergency that was declared after their attacks.
If you thought the anarchists who commandeered a privately owned downtown building were out of town now, well, think again. As Cairo 7 Eyewitness News reporter Christina McKenna has found out, they're still here and still living rent-free.
Susan, when these anarchists moved out of the building behind me on Saturday, a lot of people thought they should have been headed to jail. Instead, it turns out a lot of them just headed around the corner, and they're now living in a building right over here where they're enjoying electricity, hot water, and heat, all rent-free.
Saturday afternoon was a celebration here. 7 days after they commandeered this downtown building, anarchists walked away without a word from police.
It feels to me like we won.
And at least some are still winning. As part of the deal to get them to surrender this building, anarchists were offered housing just around the corner at the same price. The building is owned by the Low Income Housing Institute, a private nonprofit that is in large part funded by the city and is now working with the city to house the anarchists.
First of all, with criminal trespassing, that was me or you or the average person on the street, we'd be in jail.
John Satoli can't believe the anarchists aren't in jail now. As a lawful tenant in the building the anarchists had seized, he was locked out of his packaging and shipping business for a week during his busiest season. Satoli can't believe he's now contemplating bankruptcy, and the people who put them there have paid no consequence at all.
They walked away. They walked away, and the city of Seattle, low-income housing, moved them across the street on me and yours taxpayers' dollars.
So why didn't the police department arrest the anarchists when they moved out of that building? Well, that's a question a lot of people are asking, especially since the West Precinct is just down the block. We asked the police department this weekend. We asked them again today. They still haven't returned our call with an answer.
The riotous behavior I saw was by the Seattle Police Department, the Washington State Patrol, and the Federal Bureau of Investigations.
From the city's standpoint, we had security. And at least 20 agencies were involved. We had the lead, but clearly the Secret Service, the FBI, all of the state and local agencies dealing with security, the Port of Seattle, ATF, and a lot of work from traveling to Geneva to looking at the NATO conference in Washington, D.C., trying to do the best they could to understand what both the threat was and then how to plan to do it.
It's a
just makes me furious.
Building owner Wal Louis says he wanted police to arrest the demonstrators who occupied his 3-story building at the start of WTO meetings. He says they left a mess.
We're just cleaning up the mess right now. There's some human waste up there that we haven't removed, and nobody wants to touch it. We'll try to find an outfit to do that.
Instead of eviction, police asked housing activists to negotiate with demonstrators. Sharon Lee of the Low Income Housing Institute convinced the protesters to voluntarily leave the building, in part by offering them temporary housing in a private nonprofit shelter around the corner.
I think we avoided a major confrontation.
This is a failure of leadership.
No, my friends, it's not a failure of leadership. From the start to the finish and even after, the anarchists were housed. They were protected. They were not to be arrested by Seattle police. It's a staged, managed operation. And since Seattle, these same anarchists have been used in Washington, D.C. to create a state of emergency. For a day, they allow them to spray paint pig on police cars and attack officers. And then the police are released once they're at fever pitch. They are useful tools to neutralize the general population's ability to engage in political protest. All started by 30 to 40 anarchists running around, burning and beating and smashing and stealing. And the police, like dogs at the end of a chain, a Rottweiler you've been slapping, suddenly had their leashes released, and with wanton abandon, they rampaged out in a berserk fashion and attacked old ladies, store owners, you name it.
We've all witnessed the confrontations over the past few days. At times, it's hard to tell whether police are protecting citizens or threatening them. When 2 apparent Good Samaritans stop to help a fallen woman, they all get pepper sprayed. Even media members weren't spared.
For the moment there was any more than 3 or 4 people on the street together, they've suspended our right to gather together on the street. The Constitution's been suspended in Seattle today. These people were doing absolutely nothing.
Nobody was directly confronting the police. No one laid hands on anybody. Nobody touched property. And they were arrested anyway solely because the WTO comes to town. China and other foreign governments wander in here, and they've suspended our Constitution, supposedly the greatest democracy in the country. And now they're gassing everybody. What did you see here? Did you see any violence?
In downtown Seattle today, the First Amendment ended at 4th and Spring.
Are you part of an organized protest today? I'm not going to tell you again. You either leave or go to jail.
Not only could you not say what's on your mind, you couldn't wear it.
What? Give me that. Give me that. Yeah. Sir, let's not get into a big scuffle over it. Okay?
This man had an anti-WTO sticker on his backpack.
He took it off my...
Right. There's no protest down here. You saw what happened yesterday to your city. We're not going to let it happen again, okay?
Not allowed to have a sticker?
Not here.
These officers stand guard at just one corner of a 50-block no-protest zone in downtown Seattle. Since a civil emergency was declared, talk of free speech, at least past this point,
It's a no-protest zone, sir.
became moot.
You just took his button, am I right?
He did.
He reached onto his body and pulled it right off.
I asked if I could go through. He said I couldn't if I had a button, and I wasn't going through the line, and then he ripped it off my jacket.
Now, if I say I'm protesting WTO, I can't go in. If my T-shirt said I supported the WTO, could I go in? That's not a protest.
It's a no-protest zone, hence no protest.
Backpacks and bags were also searched for banners or gas masks.
Gas masks are illegal to possess today in the city of Seattle.
How can you guys mandate something like that?
What's that?
Just curious, how can you mandate something like
Because
that?
they declared the city a state of emergency.
But you don't know what thoughts are in my head, right?
I have no idea.
But
Are you protesting? Are you protesting? There's no protest zone down there. You go down there and protest, you risk arrest. Okay? I'm just telling you that. You understand that?
Understood.
Okay.
What country is this?
It's a situation that is clearly uncomfortable for those who want to get through to protest and those who block their way.
What we're trying to do is keep protesters out and the business people and citizens go in, okay?
City leaders believe the free speech of yesterday came at too high a cost. That's why, at least for today, the First Amendment ended.